Hello, everyone. Thank you for showing up for the webinar. My name is Mike. Call sign is Kilo Delta 2, Kilo Oscar Golf, and I'm located in Wellington, Florida. I'm part of the technical support group at SDRplay, and I'm with my colleague, Steve. Steve?
Hello, everybody. This is Steve talking to you from Dallas, Texas. There's a hurricane that's pointing our way, but I think it's going to be long gone by the time it gets up here. But we're hoping for some much-needed rain up here as well. At this point, I'd just like to say a big apology to those of you that tried to join us on Saturday, and we had those technical issues. And the result was they took away the keys, they confiscated them, and they're not going to let me drive again ever. So we should be good to go today. So anyway, it's nice to see we got about 60 people on there already from all over the place.
Nice.
I was hoping to see some hams here from Alabama. For the simple reason that last weekend was going to be the Huntsville Ham Fest, which I always enjoy going to every year. And I know we get hams from all around the Southeast come up there as well. And it's a real disappointment not being able to go this year. So for those of you that didn't make it, I hope to see you there next year. And before we go on, is there anything else you want to say, Mike?
No, just thank you, everybody, for your patience and for coming back again the second time. We have a really good show planned for you guys.
Yeah, talking of which, let's have a look at the agenda for today's show. And it's kind of a mixed bag. It's all centered on SDR Uno version 1.4. And but along the way, we're going to have a kind of a mix of information for people that may actually be new to SDR Uno, who may be using it for the first time with version 1.4, and also for experienced users that have been with us and along the way, adding each release as it's come along. And we'll talk about just a couple of little issues that people have had with 1.4 specifically. Then we're going to talk about how to get started, and again we'll have two ways of looking at it. I'll show you what it might be like if you're a ranked beginner, and then Mike will come on and he'll show us in more detail. And then the big thing we want to get into is to talk about the plugins, which are the big new feature for 1.4. And then while we have everybody, we still see some issues with general troubleshooting showing up on the forums here and there. So we'd like to go through that. And then by then we'll have a look at the Q&A. We'll see what's coming in from you on chat, and we'll try to address that. So first up, let's look at what's new in Uno 1.4. So in terms of new features, the first one is the visual squelch threshold. There's also an auto LO offset function, which should be good news for people that have struggled with offsetting the LO. And then the main feature, as I mentioned before, is the plugins. And along the way, we fixed an issue with FM broadcast audio. There was a fairly long-standing issue whereby the audio would distort at volume settings above 50%. So that's now been fixed. So first up, let's have a quick look at the visual squelch. And I'm not going to spend very long talking about this because I've already released a video that goes through this in detail. The basic squelch function is activated as before in the RX control panel. You turn it on and then you adjust the level with the slider that's next to it. But there's a new button down in the lower right-hand corner of the main spectrum window that turns on a visual indicator for the threshold rather, and you'll see that horizontal yellow line across the main spectrum window, which is a representation of the squelch level. And as you change the slider in RX control, that will move up and down correspondingly. And like I say, we already have a video demo of that, and we will add the links to that in the description for this webinar later. So now let's show a little video, and let's talk about the auto LO offset function.
To apply, which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free. We're very impressed with how
when SDR Uno starts up, the LO frequency and the VFO frequency are both the same, which is no big deal if you're in LIF mode. But hear that distortion when you go to 0 IF.
free at ZipRecruiter.com/hire. That's ZipRecruiter/hire. ZipRecruiter.com/hire.
Going back to LIF mode, the sound is clear.
During Small Business Month with all you need to offer. 45% on computers and servers.
That is why you've heard in the past about achieving an offset between the VFO frequency and the LO frequency. So just click to one side in the spectrum and then use the scroll wheel to retune to the VFO frequency you want, which will now be offset from the LO.
877-ASK-DEL or visit Dell.com/.
As you can hear, it sounds pretty good regardless of whether you're in LIF or ZIF mode once you have an offset in place.
It works fast and you won't stink. Its unique formula with emu oil penetrates deep to relieve arthritis pain, sore muscles, joints, and more.
You can get rid of that stuff.
New in SDR Uno v1.4 is the ability to automatically generate an LO offset in ZIF mode. If you open up the main settings panel, just check the box for auto LO offset. We'll now restart the program and allow that to take effect. When we restart the software, we notice that the LO frequency no longer appears in the upper right of the main spectrum window. However, it is still available in the lower left corner. You'll see it indicated as 1069 kHz, which corresponds to the 11 kHz default offset that was from the main settings window. Now, regardless of whether you're listening in LIF or ZIF mode, the audio is perfectly clear.
Westbound 30 before East Loop 820, the right lane still affected by an accident and traffic slow from before Cook's Lane.
Okay, I hope that made some sense to you. And again, we will be uploading a link to that particular video in the comments for the webinar after we're complete today. Now, the other big feature is the plugins, and we're going to come back and talk about that in depth in a little bit. But first, I want to go into updating the software. We get a lot of questions in the forums and emails and so on asking about, you know, what do I do? I got notified there's a new update available. Do I have to uninstall the old software? And so on and so forth. So we prepared a little video clip to address that. So let's go over updating and installing SDR Uno. So you go to start SDR Uno one day and suddenly you see a notice. There's a new version available. What to do? Quite simply, just follow the directions and download the update. There is absolutely no need to remove the existing installation. And by so doing and installing on top of your existing installation, you'll retain all the settings that are saved in the SDR Uno ini file. When given the choice to download and save the installation file, I normally do that. The simple reason being that if I ever need to revert to the previous version, all I have to do is run the installer again. When prompted, be sure to unplug any RSPs you have plugged in at this stage of the installation. Once the installation is complete, it is then safe to plug back in any RSPs you have. Then you can restart SDR Uno and enjoy the new software. You will notice that your previous settings have been retained. For example, if I look at my workspaces, they're still there just as before. Okay, again, hopefully that made some sense for you. As you will have seen in the video, just installing on top of an existing install normally works perfectly well, and you're up and running just like you were before with the added features available. And in fact, in general, 1.4 has probably been the most stable release of Uno we've had to date. The number of problems have been relatively small. And we did discover a few minor issues, and I don't mind fessing up to that because in record time, we've already fixed them. And the current version that's available from the website has now taken care of that. So just for reference, in case this was something that you'd noticed, I'm pleased to let you know they've been fixed. There were some issues with band framing on the 70 centimeter and 23 centimeter bands, and there were a few somewhat esoteric issues using diversity mode with the RSP Duo. And of note, mainly to people in Europe, because we don't have any DAB over here in North America, there were some issues with the DAB plugin. But the good news is that all those have been fixed. And as an added bonus, we've added some more functionality. There is now a warning flag if you have the IF-AGC disabled. As you may know, we normally recommend leaving IF-AGC turned on and just adjusting the RF gain in the case of signal overload. The plugin functionality has been improved as a result of what we discovered with the initial releases, and there is now a USB transfer mode option, which we're not going to cover in detail here today. But if you saw the other video that Andy recently released about running an RSP remotely on a Raspberry Pi, and then using the full version of SDR Uno to control it over your local network, that is where that USB transfer mode option comes in useful. So let's have a quick look at the most common issues and how to fix them, just in case that they were the ones affecting you. Okay, so overloading is one of the ones that feature, excuse me, one of the things that have been reported by many people, and that in fact was caused by people playing with the DAB plugin, which actually turned off the IF-AGC. It took care of that on its own, but then it didn't bother turning the IF-AGC back on again. So when people left the plugin and went back to SDR Uno, they may have inadvertently not known that the IF-AGC had been left turned off, and that was why they were seeing overload. So you can fix that in the main settings window by turning on IF-AGC. And as I mentioned before, there is now going to be a warning sign that comes up in the main window if IF-AGC has been turned off. We also are doing some work on the DAB plugin. It's a work in progress, and there'll be further refinements to that. But basically, that problem should be gone as far as new users are concerned. The one other issue was people seeing mirrored frequencies. And the interesting thing here is that some weird things were going on behind the scenes, and the real root cause of that was that there was corruption happening to the ini file. As you know, that's where a lot of parameters are saved, and that's another topic we're going to get to later. So specifically what was happening is the channel skew settings were being messed up, and it could be fixed by manually going in and adjusting it. But to be honest, the best solution once you've got a corrupted ini file is to just reset the ini, get rid of that corrupt file, and generate a new one. Again, we believe this problem has been fixed, and if you download the new version available from SDRplay.com, you shouldn't see that issue remaining anymore. So now let's move on, and this next section is geared primarily towards new users or people that have reset the software completely and want to make sure everything's working, you know, how to get it up and running the first time. So here's a quick way to check that. Let's have a quick look at how we can verify that SDR Uno is working after we've done a complete reset, or perhaps you're a first-time user. First thing is, get rid of unnecessary windows. By default, many windows open that aren't needed to verify performance. If available, select the correct antenna input and then hit the play button. At this point you should see signals. Use the band select buttons to select the appropriate band. That will also select the correct mode for you and make sure you're within the right frequency range. Click on various bands until you see some signals. Here we see activity on 20 meters. Always adjust for maximum gain unless you see an overload warning, in which case back off the gain until the warning goes away. If you're not sure about your antenna connections, just use a piece of wire. Anything that's lying around will make a good enough antenna for the broadcast band, for example. Again, use the band select buttons to select the medium wave broadcast band. That will ensure you're in the right mode and in the right frequency range, and straight away you'll see signals. As you can see, you don't need to mess with any of the advanced functions of SDR Uno to simply receive signals and verify all is okay. Okay, that was the quick and dirty approach to getting up and running. A couple of things I want to clarify there. When I say get rid of unnecessary windows, of course, many of those windows are indeed necessary. But the point is that you can be up and running and verify that you're up and running without needing to go in and adjust multiple windows. So as long as you have the main window open, an RX control, and the main and auxiliary spectrum windows, you're good to go. The other thing I'd like to point out is in that video I was using, I believe it's a 15-inch HP laptop, and it didn't actually populate the screen with that many windows, whereas it can be a little bit more daunting on a bigger display, because you'll also have a plugins window will open up, you'll have a scanner window open up, you'll have memory panel opening up, and probably a few others as well, depending on your screen resolution. So that was kind of what I meant by don't get daunted by having so many windows available. The other thing I wanted to mention was people often say, well, maybe I don't have a good enough antenna. And towards the end of that clip, I showed you my infamous blue wire antenna. If you've ever seen me do a live presentation, you may be familiar with this. It's just a piece of wire with a banana plug on the end, which goes into a PL259 to SMA adapter. And once you do that, that gives you enough signal to be able to check at least AM broadcast stations. Okay, so that's a quick check. You don't need to have anything special antenna wise. And you know, the other thing is, though, that I don't want people to get the wrong idea that SDR Uno does not have flexibility. So what I'm about to do here is show you what it looks like when you have a lot more windows after you've done a reset. And SDR Uno has the flexibility to use it the way you like. I like to use band select buttons and then click on the display. Other people like full manual control, and one person that likes that would be Mike. So I'm going to turn this over to Mike and let him give you a live demo of what it looks like on his computer when he does a reset.
Hey everybody. Okay, so as Steve said, SDR Uno does have a ton of flexibility within its panels and its parameters. Out of the box, I leave basically everything at default except for a few things. When I launch SDR Uno, after let's say performing a reset or anything like that, the first option I go into is my main panel settings. And within my main panel settings, I just travel across the tabs. Right in the input, I leave my IF mode at 0 IF. The auto LO offset, I usually keep disabled. Within the IF AGC, I leave that at default. Calibration, I let SDR Uno auto calibrate for me using a known frequency, which I'll show later. The offset, nothing really for me to change in there within TMAID or the ORIG. Within miscellaneous, I do check off show UTC because I do log shortwave stations and I participate in all the SDRplay community forums, and I like to post the things that I'm listening to. So within the main SP status bar, I like it to show UTC. So that I always keep checked off. Within the RX control settings, very few options I need to change in here. I change my output to my main sound card. I do enable the lock output fractional resampler because I do automatic picture transmission decoding. And it's in the manual. I will leave a link in the description of this video when it's done of why I enable this. It does get a little bit lengthy. Within RDS, which is for decoding the station information from FM broadcast stations, I changed my region to North America. You have two options, EU and NA. Wherever you reside, pick accordingly. Within CAT, I do have programs that externally control SDR Uno, and this is the feature that enables that. So I pick my COM port, which is 1, and I enable it. So this way an external app can control SDR Uno. Within the ORIG is basically default. Everything else here is default. Let me click play, and there are a few other options I do change. Within the aux SP, let me bring this down. By default, it's going to show the bandpass. I like it to show everything within the bandpass and outside of the bandpass, so clicking F does that. The noise floor is extremely low, so I go into my settings for the aux SP, and I lower my bass. Now I can adjust it here, and if you look right over here, you'll see the bass line. I like to show a little bit of the noise. This is where I can get an idea of the characteristics of the signal. So we can close those settings. We'll bring that back up. Let's see, what else do I basically change? That's really it. I mean, I'll load up my memory panels, and I'll leave a link in the description also for you guys after the video where you can download all of my SDR Uno frequency banks, which you guys are more than welcome to use. Let me just load mine up, and I'll do a quick calibration. And these are my basic settings out of the gate. I just change my audio output, I change my IF mode, and SDR Uno is ready to go. Oh, and I also enable my EX control, which is my favorite panel in SDR Uno. So let's go ahead and get the banks loaded. Let's go into my documents, my memory panel, and let's pull up a time signal, and I will calibrate the RSP. So let's find WWV, and here is WWV. I'm going to go into the main panel settings. Oh, my apology, I'm going to go into the RX control panel settings, and I'm going to perform a calibration against WWV at 15 megahertz. You have to make sure that that SDR Uno is in synchronous AM mode in order for it to calibrate. So you'll see here I'm about 7.4 hertz out. So let's bring this down. Hopefully you guys can see it. And I'm out by about 7.4, 7.2. So I'm going to perform an auto calibration. I have a real strong signal here with WWV. I'll perform the calibration, and we'll see what the offset is now. 0.2, 0.3, so I'm calibrated. I'm good to go. So let's bring this back. Let's put my workspace back. And the last option I change is the EX control. By default, SDR Uno is going to show the plugin module here, not the module, the window. I prefer the EX control because I'm using that most often. If I wanted to have both panels enabled, let's just put this back. Let's go to our options. Let's go to auto layout. Let's change that, and I'll enable the plugin. And I can slide that over. And I just save my workspace. And this is basically my complete SDR Uno setup. I mean, you guys seen me do it. It took about 3 minutes. I can get this up and running in less than 30 seconds. It's really, it's easy. I like SDR Uno because it allows me the flexibility to do set this up the way that I want to use it for my listening habits. If I'm going to change what I'm doing in SDR Uno, I'll create another workspace. If I'm going to do decoding, I'll create a workspace for that. If I'm going to run virtual receivers, multiple virtual receivers, I'll create a workspace for that. And it really allows me the flexibility to listen to the bands pretty much seamlessly without not many issues. I'll be honest. I really enjoy using SDR Uno, and I'm not saying that because I work for the company. I'm saying that because it's a phenomenal piece of software. It really has come a long way.
Mike?
Oh, my pleasure.
And one thing I'd mention, I noticed you were bringing up the memory panel there. Some people forget sometimes when they bring up a memory panel, they say they click on a frequency and it doesn't show up. And the key thing is to hit that memory control button in RX control to make sure that the memory panel will do that. But I think you did a great job there of demonstrating how flexible it is, and you can expand or contract the features that are appearing on the screen to suit whatever your own particular workflow is.
Right, your listening style. It's really flexible.
I think it's awesome. But anyway, having done that, let's move on to the meat of this that everyone's waiting for, and let's talk about plugins. This was a big new feature in 1.4, and you saw Mike showing the plugin window, and the goal here was to put a system in place that third-party developers could use to hook their own software, be it decoding software, control software, you name it. They could build that, have the hooks there to integrate that with SDR Uno. And by way of a demonstration, we have included 3 plugins with SDR Uno out of the box, one for DAB, one for DX Cluster, and one for an audio recorder. And all the information is available to developers, and there's a link there you see at the bottom of the screen where developers can go and find out the information. We really want to encourage third parties to do this. At SDRplay, our goal is not to develop more and more plugins, okay? We want to develop the roadmap for SDR Uno and take it down to from 1.4 to 1.41, eventually to 2.0. So very much regard these plugins as demonstrators of the power that's available. And let's have a look at what's in there. And first up, I'm going to turn it over to John because we can't demo DAB here in North America, but John did a little clip for us showing how the DAB plugin works when you're located in England.
We're going to take a look at the DAB plugin for SDR Uno. We'll talk about plugins and introduce DAB and then demonstrate the plugin. Plugins started with version 1.4 of SDR Uno, and we provided 3 examples which are demonstrators. They're not part of the core SDR Uno software, and the DAB plugin is one of these. So what plugins do is allow third-party applications to access SDR Uno controls. These third-party programs can interact seamlessly with the SDR Uno core software. They're not part of the core offering, so some plugins may be more stable than others, but they are totally separate from the main SDR Uno program. You can see sdrplay.com/plugins to keep up to date as new plugins become available. With version 1.4, when you run the plugin installer, you'll see some additional information about a specific audio recorder codec that is needed for the more recent DAB Plus standard. If you're unsure how to do this, you can go to your Windows Start menu and go to the DAB plugin help file. DAB is digital audio broadcasting, and it's available in several countries around the world, not in the USA, and it occupies the band 3 upper VHF bands from 174 megahertz upwards. There's some 41 of these ensembles or multiplexers, sometimes called blocks, and each of those can carry a number of channels. Some channels use the older MP2 format, and those are the regular DAB channels, but there's also the DAB Plus channels that use a more efficient codec, and that's the one that needs the special codec downloading. Well, the DAB plugin has very close interaction with SDR Uno, taking the IQ data in and providing the audio out through the volume controls and mute functions within SDR Uno. There's a scanning facility to populate the channels with signals, and it stores a channel list. It allows a single block to be scanned should you want that, and all the found channels are stored in a scan list text file that can be edited. On the main plugin display that you see here, there's additional information presented like the multiplex name, more transmitter information, and below you can see the text being broadcast by the particular channel. You can access your scanlist.txt file by going to the Options menu within the SDR Uno main panel and opening up the data directory in Explorer. The scanlist.txt file has a single line for each of the stations in the channel list. And you can remove weaker channels. You might want to remove unwanted channels or change the channel list order. If you edit this file, make sure you only remove whole lines at a time. A future upgrade may not be backward compatible, but we would always warn you if that's the case. So to start the demo, go to DAB, click on Load Plugins, and up will pop the DAB plugin panel. Make sure that you're already running SDR Uno. If not, press play. And just a note here, which we'll cover in the demo, you may need to go back and adjust the RF gain. Typically, you'd want it fairly high, but excessive signals can cause some issues, and a future update may address that. But so there's a little bit of experimentation needed. Then finally you press full scan and the scanning begins. So I've got SDR Uno already running. I'm going to select the DAB plugin, and I'm also going to select the audio recorder. By holding the control key, I can highlight both these plugins and load them both at the same time. You can see the DAB plugin panel has appeared here, and you'll notice that the channel box is empty at this point because this is the first time that I'm doing a scan. So let's set the scan going by pressing full scan. The whole process takes about 3 minutes to scan all the way from 174 megahertz right up to 240 megahertz. And there's a progress bar along the bottom here, and as it finds channels, they will appear in the box here. It's now found its first set of 7 channels. That's after about a minute and a half, and now it's up to 15. So the scan's complete, and you'll see it now says full scan, and we found 69 channels. And if you scroll down the channel list, you can see there's a mixture of DAB and DAB plus channels have been found. As I mentioned earlier, it's important to make sure you've got the advanced codec loaded that's needed for DAB plus decoding, and if you haven't already done that, that can be found just by going to your start menu and then amongst the SDRplay programs you'll see DAB plugin help. This is where the documentation is for the DAB plugin. So in the documentation, as well as instructions on using this plugin, you'll find all the information you need for downloading the freeware advanced audio decoder. You'll notice I've been on mute, so if I now unmute the audio, we can select initially a DAB station. That wooden rocking chair along. For each channel, there's additional information at the side. Here's the multiplexer. You can see the transmitter information, and below you can see the RDS text relating to the channel. You'll also see the signal to noise ratio displayed. Here we've got 18 dBs, which is a good healthy SNR. You'll find that DAB stations typically need at least 8 or 9 dBs of SNR, and the DAB plus stations are a little bit more. And here's an example of a DAB plus station. edit the channel list, go to Options and then Open Data Directory in Explorer. And you'll see here that you have a file called the scan list. And each channel has its own entry here, which can be deleted or moved around to arrange things as you want them. I mentioned the RF gain setting because in extreme strong signal localities it may be necessary to back this off in order to decode the stations. We had to automate that in a future version, but so there may be a little bit of trial and error. Certainly where I am in central UK, I have to back it off a little bit, and it works pretty well. I'd like to just show a neat feature now with the audio recorder. So if we just open up
quite strong recommendations for how you could make it clear, which I hope they will adopt.
Channel,
I strongly believe that any trade deal that we do must have
we simply press start recording on the audio recording plugin.
Goods to high welfare standards and high environmental standards abroad, good on them, but that protect the environment and animal welfare. Absolutely. To play back the recording, you'll notice I had it just in my documents folder, so we simply open up my documents folder. Our farmers, if people are able to produce goods to high welfare standards and high environmental standards abroad, good on them, but that protect the environment.
So that's a nice demonstration of two plugins working together. The DAB plugin with its audio piped through SDR Uno and then back out to another plugin, which is in this case a simple audio recorder function. So I hope you can have a lot of fun with the DAB plugin. It's a very versatile piece of software. It is work in progress, and any instabilities are no reflection on the stability of the core SDR Uno version 1.4. As I say, the features that are demonstrated in the three plugins that we've initially provided with version 1.4 are really just showcasing the kind of capabilities that exist. So keep an eye on the plugins page on our website for news of more third-party plugins in the future. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, John, for that. An excellent little video there from John. Before we proceed, I just want to bring up or just cover a point that came up in chat on the live chat regarding viruses and the like. We're still figuring out exactly how we're going to host the plugins, but we will not host anything on the SDRplay.com website that has not been checked and proven to be virus free. Now, if you as a user download and install a plugin from any other source, then that is entirely up to you to make sure that there is no vulnerability exposed. But we will be checking anything that we give our seal of approval to, if you will, to ensure that it is totally virus free. So we can talk more about that when we get to the end of this segment. Moving on now, I'd like to turn it back over to Mike to look at the DX Cluster plugin, which is pretty cool.
One of the plugins that we have provided at the launch of SDR Uno version 1.4 is the DX Cluster plugin. This plugin shows some of the sorts of annotations that can be added to the main SP display. For those of you that are not familiar with what a DX Cluster is, it is a worldwide interconnected network of servers that allow licensed amateur radio operators a central hub to send and receive DX spots. A DX spot is a record of when a contact from one amateur radio operator to another is made. This is logged on a server so that every other amateur radio operator logged into one of the DX Cluster networks can see when and where the DX spot was made. By displaying this information in real time on the SDR Uno main SP display, you can easily see where successful contacts have been made recently on the band you're currently visualizing. I also want to inform you guys that the server will store DX spots across all bands, but we will only see the spots that are logged within the frequency limits of our main SP display. Now we can easily change bands while the DX Cluster plugin is running and then see any spots that are within the new band. Earlier I said that the DX Cluster system is used by licensed amateur radio operators. Indeed, you will need a valid call sign put into this plugin for it to work. If you're not a licensed amateur radio operator, I found a website, and I'll put a link in the description, that will enable you to obtain a call sign for shortwave listening, which you can use in this plugin. So all the shortwave listeners, you can get a valid call sign and input it into the plugin, and it will enable it to work. So let's have a look at some of the key features of this plugin. When you save a workspace in SDR Uno, the plugin will get notified of a workspace save event and will have the opportunity to store the plugin on-screen coordinates in SDR Uno's INI file. The next time you start the plugin, it will appear as part of the saved workspace layout. The other parameters within the DX Cluster plugin can also be stored in SDR Uno's INI file by pressing the Save button. The saved values and settings are then used the next time the plugin is started. Let's have a look at those settings in more detail. As I mentioned before, a valid call sign is required for the system to work. If you use your call sign in another DX Cluster tool, you need to add an extension to the call sign used in this plugin. This keeps the call sign unique for each system it's used in. The extension is just a dash followed by an integer value added to the end of your call sign. It's not important what the extension value is, as long as it's unique. The cluster field requires a valid hostname and port number for the DX cluster you're trying to connect to. This entry must be in the form of a hostname, colon, and port number. You will find a range of DX cluster telnet servers online, or you may have one recommended to you. We provide a default entry if you don't have the details for one. The timer field contains the amount of minutes that the DX spot will stay visible for. This timer starts from the moment that the DX spot is added to the telnet server, not from the time that it's displayed in the main SP display. This timer is specific to each spot. The label baseline indicates at what dBm value the lowest DX spot call sign will be displayed. All DX spots that are either on the same frequency or nearby frequencies will be raised up to avoid text overlapping. The label color can be changed between the predefined colors. This affects both call sign text and associated lines and markers. The start button becomes a stop button when the button is pressed. Stopping the plugin allows the parameters I've just explained to be changed. This concludes our short demonstration of the DX Cluster plugin.
Okay, thank you for that one, Mike. Third one up is more of a capability demonstration than anything else, since you have always been able to record a particular station you're tuned to using built-in tools in Windows, but the audio recorder plugin just makes it that much easier to do from within Uno. And you saw this briefly demonstrated by John when he was talking about DAB, but now we have another clip that shows how you can use it standalone, and we're going to go back to Mike for that.
One of the plugins we have provided at the launch of SDR Uno version 1.4 is the audio recorder plugin. The audio recorder plugin records the current tuned VFO for the selected VRX. The plugin will output the audio in either PCM wave or MP3 format. Let's have a look at some of the key features of the audio recorder plugin. Folder. Folder displays the selected folder that the audio recording will be saved to. File. When the recording is in progress, the file name will be displayed here. Size. During the recording, the output file size will continually be displayed here. VRX. Select the VRX to record the audio from. Duration. Displays the length of recording. Recording format. Selects between either PCM wave or MP3 recording format. Select folder. Use this button to specify the location of the audio recording. Start recording. Use this button to stop and start the audio recording.
My 6500 for several years, and I of course had a completely different viewpoint about Flex than that. But I wasn't going to argue with him or anything, but I just let him use the multiplex, and he changed his whole perception after that. And now he's figured out how to use it, I think. Back to you, Gary, W5OG. W5OG on the Flex radio net. This is W2C. Well, that's why, Dudley has been so valuable with, as far as the Flex radio support is concerned, because he actually took the time to talk to the people and make sure their computers on the Flex radio net. This is W2C. Well, that's why, Dudley has been so valuable with, as far as the Flex radio support is concerned.
This concludes our short demonstration of the audio recording plugin.
Okay, thanks again for that, Mike. Very helpful. And let's have a little chat now about community plugins. As mentioned before, the three plugins that come packaged with SDR Uno 1.4 are more demonstrators than anything else. Although in particular, you'll notice that the DAB plugin is very useful if you live in an area where DAB signals are provided. I must admit I'm a little jealous living here in Texas that I don't have DAB to play with. All I have is HD radio, which doesn't seem to compare. The DX cluster plugin I thought was very impressive as well, and that kind of leads us towards talk of the community plugins. And some people have already been active, and we welcome anyone that works with us on community plugins. I noticed that Eric Cottrell is with us today.
Hey, Eric.
Eric was one of the first guys to generate plugins. He's got 2 to his name so far. And one of them is called Fran, and does an excellent job of labeling signals in the RF spectrum. So, Mike, if you're ready, how about we do a quick live demo of seeing Fran in action, okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Fran displays annotations on the main SP, and what it's doing is, let me just load the plugin. Let me bring this into view. It can take, as far as I know, it uses it uses a shortwave schedule that's combined list, or it could use SDR Uno's S1B files and display that information on the main SP. Let me load up the CSV file, and I'm going to have it display. I can pick the sources, which is phenomenal. Usually I work with AOKI or the EIBI database. When I select that, it's just going to show me what's within the visible bandwidth of the main SP. I'm not sure of the technicalities of what's going on behind the scenes, but as you can see here, as I zoom in and I move around, everything is being updated and letting me know exactly what this transmission might be at this particular time, which is phenomenal. And let's see what other, I just want to take a quick peek at what other options it has. Okay, we have the sources where it can pick from and the different formats, which would be here. So it could be your, as I said, your SDR S1B files, which are your banks. Let me load up one of my banks. I have a HF bank that's pretty filled up. I just need to find it. Okay, and as I go up and down the bands, you'll see that my frequencies will be annotated on the main SP. And that's all I really have to show with Fran. Ordra is another plugin. I don't have that installed, which is another phenomenal plugin. What that's doing, I was testing it earlier. It allows me to take it basically is taking the stream from the aux SP and it's routing it. It allows me to route it to RDS SPI. I wish you can bear with me, Steve. If you have something to show, I can get that queued up and I can try to demo that also a little bit later. I like to get the other plugin shown.
Well,
okay.
I'll tell you what, Mike. Let's just carry on chatting for now. I don't want to pressure you to do something that isn't immediately to hand. But I'd also like to give another shout out at this point. You know, Eric's done a superb job and
phenomenal.
He's been constantly updating, and I think he said in chat he's got even more features coming up, which is great. I'd like to also give a shout out to Eddie McDonald. Eddie has written a number of plugins in the past for other hardware and software, but he now has one for the Contour Shuttle, which is a relatively inexpensive control wheel that works with SDR Uno, and that's excellent. And we hope to see more and more of these. We are very interested in working with any third parties that want to work with us to develop more and more plugins. And I do want to stress, SDRplay themselves, we don't want to be in the plugin development business. We're happy to work with others. We've got our own roadmap we need to follow for SDR Uno. But we are more than happy to work very closely with any developers to increase the functionality of SDR Uno. I think somebody mentioned, what was it? DRM, I think, came up in chat. It's always either DRM or DMR. Certainly, we would very much like people that have third-party software for doing that type of decoding to contact us and work with us to develop plugins for SDR Uno to make that easier. So, Eddie's with us. Eddie McDonald, thank you very much. Good to see both you and Eric there. We really appreciate what you've done for us. So, Mike, do you want to say anything else about plugins, or shall we move on here a little bit?
I think we can move on.
Okay, great. So, let's talk about general troubleshooting. And I wasn't sure up front when I put this on the agenda how much we needed to have this, but seeing some of the questions that have come up in chat, I think now's a good time to look at it. So the first thing I want to emphasize is when you have a problem with SDR Uno, there is almost never any benefit to trying to uninstall everything and reinstall everything. All that does is take time and makes you frustrated. There are other things you can try first, and doing the uninstall thing should only ever be a last resort. And I would hope you've contacted us through the ticket system, and we've got to the point where we say, hey, you need to do that. There is a new help system set up at SDRplay.com. If you go to the website and hit help, you'll be guided to finding some information. But I just want to go through a few common things here right now that may get you up and running again very quickly. So let's first talk about API error messages. And anytime a window comes up that says something about the API was not initialized or needed restoring or whatever, you can go to the menu within the SDR Uno main window and select Restart the API service. And that may get you up and running right there. If that doesn't work, another option would be just to try a simple reboot to make sure the service is up and running correctly. The next thing, let's talk about doing resets, because resets are almost always a better option than trying to do a fresh install. And first up, I'd always try to do a reboot. If necessary, you can reset to factory defaults, and what that's going to do is that's going to blow away your ini file. So you will lose your workspaces if you do that. So you don't want to do this lightly, although to be honest, I find that I can create or recreate workspaces pretty quickly, and sometimes that's the best way to restore your system. So if you go in and you do a factory reset, your ini file will go away, and then a new one will be created when you run SDR Uno. And again, you can get to that setting from within the SDR Uno main window. Now, another thing, another way to do it is to use the start menu. And a lot of people don't realize that if you go to the Windows start menu and scroll down till you get to SDRplay, there's a lot of good stuff in there. There's an option to restart the API, and there's also the option to perform that reset. And there's also some stuff down there, particularly if you're in an area served by DAB and DAB+. There's some links there to some more information that might help you out. So that's another option you can do. So we talked a lot about ini files. Let's have a look at the data directory. This isn't, yeah. Okay, I've also was reminded that I need to tell you guys that often an API issue, is caused by having a problem with an intermittent connection or a bad USB cable. So it's always worth trying again using a different USB cable. There is really no magic to USB cables. I've had great success in using spare USB cables that came with every printer and scanner I bought over the years. I got a drawer full of them, and almost all of them have worked. Some cases, if you're in a bad RF environment, the kinds with the ferrite cores help. But in general, any USB cable that's certified USB 2.0 or better will work nicely. So if you see a lot of API issues, it might be worth trying a different cable. Okay, so I want to talk about the data directory, because we talk about INI files a lot, and I want to cover how you can find the INI files and what you can do with them. And at one point, you know, as I mentioned, if you do reset the INI file, you've lost your workspaces. But you can kind of preempt any problems by navigating to the INI file, and I apologize if you can't see this on your screen. It's in the data directory location, which I'll show you how to get to in a moment. It may be worth making a copy of that INI file and saving it somewhere else on your system. And then if during troubleshooting you deleted the INI file and you still had problems or whatever, then maybe you can restore that old copy and bring that in and use that and restore your workspaces. In fact, this is a feature that I think Andy has put on the roadmap for SDR Uno development, to put a little tool in there to make a backup and restore option for the INI file. You will also see in that directory there's a couple of log files, and you can open those up. In fact, let's look at a log file right now. And you can see it has various information about what's been going on there, and that may help point you in the right direction if you're experiencing a problem. Or indeed, if you go through the help system at SDRplay.com, and if you end up raising a ticket, you may be asked by someone at SDRplay to send a copy of those log files. So how could we find these files? Well, at this point, I must admit that for the longest time, in fact, I even made a little video showing you how to use File Explorer to get all the way down to where the INI file and the log files were hiding. But in fact, there is, again, an option within the SDR Uno main window that says you can go to the data directory. And that's a very quick way to take you to exactly that location. You'll see the INI file in there. You'll see the log files in there. If you're doing DAB, as John showed earlier, there will be a text file of DAB stations you found. So there's a lot of good stuff there. And again, it's accessible from the menu in the main window. And I should also mention, from that same menu, 2 items further down is the user manual. And I know people are averse to using the user manual, but there is a whole lot of information available in the manual. It was installed for you when you downloaded and installed the software, and it has been extensively reworked for SDR Uno 1.4. And kudos to Mike for putting in many hours to put all the information you need in there. And so sometimes it's worth just looking it up and browsing through it. I know a lot of people like to print the whole thing, although it takes a fair-sized forest to provide enough paper for that these days. But a lot of people will print it out and have it available as a reference. But at any time, if you need to get to the user manual, just go to options in the SDR Uno main window, and it will be there waiting for you. So let's see if we've got any other questions that need answering at this point. So let's bring Mike back in. Mike, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. No one's been feeding me any questions. I don't know if you've been trying to read the live feed as well. Okay. I know I saw a lot of questions coming through about INI files in the chat, and I think I just covered just about all of them. So the key things to remember are: don't try uninstalling, reinstalling. I must say, sometimes in the past, if there's been issues with drivers, If people get unknown devices showing up in Device Manager and stuff, you need to right-click and uninstall that stuff, unplug your RSPs, and sometimes it helps if you run the installer program again. What I normally do when a new version of Uno comes down is I will, save that installer file on my hard drive. So if I need to reinstall it, I can just double-click on it, and away you go. And that will make sure that the latest drivers are there. And then when you plug in the RSP, the correct driver should be loaded. So there should be no issues. Yeah, Brian Garber, you had a question way back in the chat. I noticed it as we went by. I hope I covered that when I talked about mirrored images. The best way to get around that is to delete the ini file, and then the ini file will recreate itself as you go along. The only thing that will be missing after you've done that is that you will have lost your saved workspaces, so you will need to recreate them. That's all you need to do. Other than that, everything is automatic. Certainly, the question came up about 1.4 not working after an uninstall and reinstall, and we just covered that. There should be no need to uninstall it. The first thing to do would be to reset to default settings, and then start up SDR Uno again, and it should be working perfectly. So follow the steps that we described in troubleshooting just now, and you should have no issues. Okay.
My personal preference for the recording would be MP3 for the size, and for what I'm recording, which is basically HF. MP3 is my preference. Steve, do you have a preference with recording?
I honestly don't have a preference, and I think the key thing is it's a preference issue. Select whichever format is best for whatever you plan on doing with this file. You may be, you may want to process it further in Audacity or something like that. Whatever format you normally use is better. I think in general, I don't know if this is still true, but if you want to play the file back when you're driving down the road in your car, I think most in-dash radios will play back MP3s, but I'm not sure they'll play back WAV files. So that may be worth thinking about.
I'm using MP3 more for the community sharing, because I'm so active in all these SDRplay groups and sharing everything that we're listening to. So MP3 is my preference. But either one. I mean, it depends on what you're using it for. Like you said, Steve, I totally agree.
Yeah, so, at this point, there's not seem to be a whole lot of questions that we haven't answered, which is good. I'm sure. Yeah, is that a DAB question, I think, coming up? I believe that. Yeah. Yeah, one thing when you're installing 1.4, there was a question about some FAAD. Anyway, I'm not even sure, because again, I don't have access to DAB+. But what happens is when you install the software, there is a comment window that comes up that tells you exactly what you need to do for DAB+. Okay, and if you're like me, you just click on OK to go away and get away from it. I think you can also go to the instructions from the Start menu in Windows, as I just described. But the bottom line is there are just 2 DLL files that will be somewhere on your Windows PC already that just need to be copied to the correct. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm getting confused here. Voices in my ear and all, but follow the instructions, download the file that's required, and put it in the location as specified in the instructions, and you're good to go. So hopefully that takes care of it. How's things going in Florida, Mike? It's actually had a little bit of rain here for a while.
Yeah, well, we had heavy winds and then rain, and then that storm, is it headed your way, Steve?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I want to see if there's any other questions. Let's see.
Yeah, we talked about the help system a few times. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is we're also doing a bit of a rework of our download pages. And I know a number of people updated to 1.4 and the new API. And for whatever reason, and I think because it doesn't work is not a valid reason, 1.4 works and works very well. But some people were using other software that did not coexist well with the latest API, and wanted to go back to 1.33 or 1.34, whatever. We will have a legacy section for downloads when we revamp the download section to let you do that. So that makes that just a little bit easier. Yeah, I've done a little bit of work on that myself. So that will be coming. I would like to stress that, and this is regardless of platform. It applies to Mac and Linux as well as Windows. There are certain versions of SDR Uno that require certain versions of the API. So some people say, well, can I keep older versions of SDR Uno on my PC? And the answer is, yeah, I've probably got 20 different versions of SDR Uno on my PC. Unfortunately, the only ones that will work right now are 1.4, because 1.4 needs the latest API, and that's what's installed on my computer. So if you cannot have more than one version of the API installed at a time. That's a key thing there. So although you can have multiple versions of SDR Uno, you can only have one API installed. So if you want to go back to 1.33 or 1.34, you will need to run the installer for 1.34. It will install that version of SDR Uno and the API that's required for that particular version. Likewise on the Mac, I use Cubic a lot. And the latest version of Cubic needs the latest API. The previous version of Cubic needed the previous API. And of course, the same thing applies to Linux. So, don't ever make the mistake of thinking you can have multiple APIs coexisting on your system. That just is not going to work.
What is the best SDR Uno group to join? I'm going to have to say that there are two of them, the independent group on Facebook and the Groups.io group are very good. And also there's a forum that is a third. There's a third one. Let me pull up the URL. I'll put links to all.
While you're pulling that up, Mike, let me stress on Facebook is probably the highest volume group, and there are actually two that directly relate to SDRplay. There's the SDRplay users group, and then there's one specifically for SDR Uno. Many people are members of both those groups. There's a lot of activity, but we understand that some people, for whatever reason, don't like to be on Facebook, and I certainly can understand that. So there's the former Yahoo groups or groups.io. That has also become fairly active. So you will get a lot of response there. But one thing I would mention is that regardless of those groups, we still get a lot of people that come in and ask questions that could have been answered either by looking at the user manual that Mike updated, or they could have been answered by going into the help section at SDRplay.com, or by looking at the audio, video and applications catalog at SDRplay.com, which you've got tons of videos that cover most of the questions that come up. I'll turn it back to Mike if he wants to talk about that third group while I read some more questions.
It's the three groups that I'm most involved in are the Groups.io and, as you said, the independent groups on Facebook. Everybody has a different preference of where they would like to communicate, but I'm most of the time on Facebook. It's almost near instantaneous, getting help and support, and just the community as a whole. It's just such a great ecosystem. All of them are great. They're all their own little ecosystem, basically. And there's a lot of great combined knowledge in there, and it's just really nice to see everybody interacting and helping each other, and it's just a really warm, inviting community. And for users that want to go away from Facebook or don't like Facebook, I totally agree and can understand. You can still put whatever information you like in there and just keep it simple. and interact with the groups. That's what I do. I'm just there for the groups, not the Facebook as a whole.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
A few more questions came through. One was, how do you access the VFO frequency in software for remote antenna tuning? And I'm assuming that this means communicating the frequency with another piece of software, for example. I believe that is accessible via the API. And it seems to me that might be a good candidate for a plugin for somebody to write. I'm sure Andy will correct me if I'm wrong. Secondly, is there a way to lock the different windows in place so they don't shift when clicked on in the wrong place? No, there is nothing built into Uno that lets you do that, although I believe there is some third-party software that lets you stick windows together. I'm going to let Mike comment on that in just a moment, but I did want to mention that there is some snap function in place in the latest version of SDR Uno, so that when you move windows close to the edge of the screen, they will snap to it when you get within a dozen pixels or so. So Mike, I think, did you ever experiment with that software that sticks windows together?
No, but I'm going to find the name of it, and just bear with me, you guys. If I'm not able to find it in time,
you go ahead and look for that. I'll take a couple more questions while we're here. Are there any plans for Tetra plugins available? There are no plans from SDRplay for that. Again, the whole purpose of the plugin system is to allow third-party developers to hook their own software into SDR Uno to perform exactly that type of function. So hopefully someone will develop a plugin for Tetra. I should mention that we have reached out to all the authors we know of for third-party software that are out there that seems to be popular with SDR Uno, and said, hey, please, let's work together and let's make plugins to make your software easier to use. So the other question was DMR, and I think I covered that before. DMR, DRM, you name it. If somebody that has a third-party software for decoding any of those modes wants to write a plugin with SDR Uno, they are welcome to do so. We've got all the tools they need to do that, and we are happy to work with them to accomplish that. But SDRplay ourselves, we have no interest in going off developing a whole bunch of new plugins. We have a roadmap to follow for SDR Uno, going down into the future all the way until multi-platform and beyond. Somebody asked for where can they get Eric's Fran plugin? If Eric is still on there, I think you might be able to post a link. If not, we will post a link in the description for this video after the seminar. And as I mentioned, there will be something coming up on our website soon that will tell you where to get that. Did I miss the link for Mike's shared Banks files? I
posted it twice. It's posted in the chat, and the AppStart interrupt use Aquasnap. That seems to be the most popular for snapping windows together.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and feel free to. I'm not following the chat that closely. I'm still trying to make sure that I'm still appearing on the screen. But yeah, if you post that back in the chat, Mike, I think that would be great. Did I miss? Is there a quick key press to jump from play to stop? I don't believe there's a hotkey for the play button. Is there, Andy?
No, there's not. Not the.
Yeah, there is a section in the user manual which you can download from the main window options user manual, and there is a section in there on command shortcuts. And that will tell you everything you can do with a key press. There is not one for doing play and stop. It is not an unreasonable feature request for the future. Again, there is an email address we would like you to use if you want to request new features. And Mike, what is that email? Because I always get it wrong.
I believe it's feedback@sdrplay.com, because I always get it wrong too myself.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Okay.
My ears will tell me if we got that wrong. Okay, here's another one. Can you recommend a methodology to use the power and SNR to CSV functionality? I'd like to render the data somehow, but don't want to reinvent the wheel. Any tips or tricks? Now, I'll let you comment on this later, Mike, but all I do when I use that function is I take the file and I import it into Excel.
Yep.
and then I define ranges and I generate charts to my heart's content in Excel.
You answered exactly what I was going to say.
I imagine people can do the same thing with OpenOffice. I don't use it myself since I use Excel extensively and have done for many years. That is how I do it, and it doesn't take very long to generate pretty pictures at all. I don't know of any other methods that people have used. Sounds like, Mike, you're the same as me.
Yes, I use Excel, but also in a quick pinch, I'll use online chart plotting software. You know, it's not software, it's websites that will allow you to upload the CSV and freely create charts for you. And I've done that a bunch of times. I haven't done it in a while, and I know I always say I'll put links in the description. I will gather all of these links of anything that I've referenced in this video, and I'll have all the information for you guys. So just bear with me and I'll have that link. But I do it the same way, Excel, or I'll use a free website that will create charts for me.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. And I'll ask again, is there a way to move all the windows at the same time? And the answer to that is no, there is no way to move all the windows at once. The idea is you move the windows to achieve a layout that you want and then save it as a workspace. There is the minimize all button in the SDR Uno main window, upper left. If you do that, then when you hit the minimize widget, all the windows will go down into the taskbar and you can restore all the windows together. So you can remove them and bring them back together, but you cannot move the windows en masse, for example, to drag the whole thing onto a different screen. Then the next one I don't really understand. Any plans for markers, frequencies, markers, label? I think that's exactly what Fran does, that Mike demonstrated earlier. There's a plugin from Eric called Fran, and it puts markers all over the Spectrum window. It's an absolutely awesome piece of software, and I think takes care of the requests for most of that. The other thing is the DX cluster plugin is interesting. It's not permanent like the Fran, you know, is a permanent database of frequencies that are used and so on. Whereas DX cluster is more of a real-time thing. When someone reports a DX, it goes into the database, it shows up on your screen, but over a period of time it will go away. So the information is never stale, it's supposed to be current. So if you're trying to find a particular frequency, it's an indication that it's active at that time. So that's what we have as far as markers and things are concerned. Anything else you want to mention there, Mike, or are you still busy researching?
No, I mean, the AquaSnap was the name of the program for snapping windows, and like you said, with the DX cluster, it's very dynamic, because if you're in a contest situation using the RSP as your PAN adapter, and you want to rack up the queues, as they call it, the QSOs, the DX cluster is like shooting fish in a barrel. You'll make contacts really, really, really quick. It's almost cheating, but it's not.
Okay, very good. So next question, is there a way to save a specific SP2 bandwidth? And the answer to that is no. The bandwidth in SP2 is determined by the button you press in the RX control window. It can be adjusted by dragging back and forth, but that information is not persistent. So there is no way in the current version to do that. But I believe in future versions of SDR Uno, we will have the ability to save a lot more information about setups in terms of frequencies and bandwidths and so on. But right now, no, but in the future, stay tuned. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions come through. I see we have, 130 people on there, and I would like to thank you very much indeed for showing up and listening to Mike and me rambling on for the last hour and 20 minutes or so. We do appreciate you coming in. We do appreciate the feedback. If you do send feature requests to feedback@sdrplay.com, I guarantee you it will be read by several pairs of eyes. Every request is noted. We can't always implement everything immediately. There is just so much we can do at a given time. Some things are easy to implement, and Andy's done a pretty damn good job of sneaking in a few feature enhancements, as indeed he did when we did the fixes for 1.4. He added some stuff that was relatively easy to put in, and we appreciate him a lot for doing that. Other things take time, are much more complicated, or in some cases we may have reasons for not wanting to do that. You just have to bear with us. Go to SDRplay.com, follow John's blog. There's always good news stuff coming up on there. We've got a lot of links that we need to edit into the description for today's webinar. It will be available in its entirety on YouTube. So if you want to review it again later, you can do that. And also we'll chop and change the little video segments that we showed along the way, like the DX cluster, the DAB, the audio plugin. They will also be available as separate downloads on YouTube, so you don't have to sit through an hour and 20 minutes. And also look at that latest video that Andy just updated on using the virtual USB port thing, so you can run an RSP elsewhere on your network on a Raspberry Pi and run the full version of SDR Uno. It's a super networking solution until we come along with the fully integrated version that's on our roadmap for SDR Uno. But anyway, thanks again. Hope to see you in the user groups. And I was also asked to point out that I kind of hoped I'd covered it when I said we look at all the features. We can't promise if or when any given feature will be implemented. We cannot make any promises like when 1.41 or whatever will be released either. Development cycles change, and we are happy to put it on the roadmap, and you better believe we're trying to implement this stuff as quickly as possible. But you know, we cannot promise that any given feature is going to be in there, or indeed when it will be released. And please bear with us on that. Andy has a huge workload, and he's doing a super job. You know, with this major release of SDR Uno, all the Linux and Mac people are going to be complaining that we're ignoring that community. So as we continue to develop and work with people that do Cubic and SOAPy SDR and all that good stuff, as we continue to work with them and refine the API for the Linux and Mac people, then the Windows people will start complaining that we don't spend enough time taking care of the Windows people. So we do the best we can, and we try and do the best we can. And we appreciate you for sticking with us. And it's always great to see you guys in the groups. I hope we'll see you face to face again before long. I've missed doing the ham shows. Yeah. There's been nothing since Hamcation for me.
I see a lot of names I recognize in the chat. Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it and showing the support and everything. I mean, it's community driven. You guys know that. I mean, I don't have to say that. You guys all know. We're here to support you 100%.
Yeah. Okay, a late question came in just before we go regarding custom presets for scanning the airband specifically. If you select the airband, you have the option to do 8.33 kilohertz steps to match the band plan in Europe, I believe. I don't think that band plan is used much in North America. In terms of custom presets, it's not a bug. You just do not have the ability to specify a custom preset for anything that isn't an even number of kilohertz. So you've got 1 kilohertz resolution on specifying a step there. Okay, I think we need to go. And again, thank you for everybody. Thank you for supporting our products. Thank you for using our software. And for those of you out there that are developing for our software, extra thank you to you guys as well. It's a pleasure interacting with all of you. And I'd like to say hello on behalf of all the other members of the SDRplay team that you haven't seen today. Andy, John, Simon, Ian, and so forth. They're doing a superb job behind the scenes, and we're trying to bring you the best software and hardware we can at the best price point we can. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.